I guess the biggest news just of the last 24 hours is the reported offer, which Sam McClure reported in The Age, from the Saints to Jacob Weitering. Of course, Sauce has gone over there. He was at the Blues for a long time. He would have those that he rates, and $12 million for Jacob Weitering, Johnno. What was your instant reaction when you first heard that?
Well, you and I have said this a couple of times, Kane, that you and I actually align with how blown away we are at some of the deals that are thrown to players, or the potential deals that are thrown to players. And we understand that the salary cap is going to rise over the next couple of years, and we understand that the average player wage will probably go up to $500 or $600 for just an average player in the competition. And yeah, I've probably adjusted my mind to that. But when you hear or when you see things like this, is this team starting to call other teams bluffs in some ways, or is this, how much pressure are they trying to put on other clubs? Are these real numbers for a Jacob Weitering, or is this just someone like Steve Silvani who's been in the system a long time? And I love the way he goes about it. He's just throwing out things to see where it sits from a Jacob Weitering point of view within the market.
Maybe, or maybe this is just the reality that free agents such as this, that's what they are going to command. Now, Norton got 9 years. I'm not sure it would be at the level of $12 million, but it would have been up there. He's a little bit younger than Weitering. Like, Weitering's 26 now. So by the time an 8-year contract ended at it's not going to start until 2025, the end of. So the first year will be 2026. It's going to be up there. I don't know. It seems completely ridiculous. Like, I look at Sean Darcy, who I was quite outspoken about at the time, and just saying, why would Fremantle do that when you've got Jackson, who was contracted this year already, and you've added another 6 onto it. Now he's missed 7 of 10 games because he's not playing this week, according to the West Australian. And he's got 6 years to go after that, and he's injury prone. Now, Weitering has had his problems with soft tissue issues, but yeah, I wonder if it's either a panic move from the Saints because they're desperately needing talent, or you're right, Sauce is just playing the game and forcing the Blues to up their offer and use more of their salary cap, which is already reportedly under pressure, to keep him.
Jacob Weitering's in the prime seat here, but if he does decide to move to St Kilda, for example, on such a deal, he becomes their best player instantly. So he probably deserves to be the highest paid player at that club. So therefore, at Carlton, that's not going to be the case with obviously Cripps being
Where does he sit? Where does he sit in the hierarchy of Carlton players? Then that's an interesting one for you.
It is.
Said last week that after they
does he sit third? And then you go Mackay and Walsh underneath him. So I'm thinking Cripps, Curnow, Weitering, and then you go Walsh, Mackay.
Yeah, I'd probably have it Curnow, Cripps, Weitering.
Yeah, so
Walsh, Mackay.
Similar in a way.
But you could argue that he's fifth. Like, you really could. I think their top 5 is as good as any. But Blues fans, Saints fans, 1300 736 736. I was watching the Adelaide game, which was a great game against Brisbane, the last game on Sunday, the draw, of course. I was watching Hugh McCluggage, and I was trying to work out how highly I rate him, because he was bobbing up everywhere. Like, he tries so hard. He's a running machine, but he had a couple of really ordinary turnovers in poor spots that went down, and Adelaide scored off. Like, the numbers we're talking for him, Johnno, like, what would you pay to keep him for Brisbane, and what's the price to let him go? Like, 'cause I don't think it's just a blank checkbook for Hugh McCluggage, because I think he's got some limitations on his game. But how do you see it?
Well, I've got an article in front of me about Will Haywood and the potential of him maybe getting $850, right? So therefore, you go, if Will Haywood is going to demand that on the open market, where's Hugh McCluggage sit in all of this? He probably sits around that 1.2 for a player. And now I know Will Haywood and the aspects around him, some of the offers in the high 600s, which probably sits about right for a Will Haywood. Okay, so the inflation to $850 is just part of the market really wanting to get this type of player into their footy club. But I'm also big, Cornesy, on the fact that if you're a superstar at a club, and you have someone come in and he might be on the $850, but look at Essendon for the example, or where Zach Merritt might be compared to a Mackay, for example. And we've got to reward the superstars in these teams. They're the ones who should be getting the really big dollars here, not And yeah, you've got to recruit and you've got to trade in. And yes, there might be inflated a little bit, but not inflated to a point where we all sit back and go, really? Because
you reckon that upsets the dressing room?
I think it could potentially upset the dressing room, Cornesy, because if you've put in 8 years of unbelievable work and you become the best player at your football club, yet a player comes in and is on more than you.
Yep.
Like, seriously. So I actually think that when the salary cap grows, the stars need to be on $2 million a year, for example. And if you're an average or below average player, you're getting that. You're getting your 200-300s up to 500-600s, depending on where you sit in the pecking order below that. But the stars need to be rewarded a lot more heavily than what they are at the moment. The traded players are being rewarded, but are the stars really being rewarded internally to what their true value could be?
I feel like we're going back to trade radio when you and I were on during that time as well. Of course, that'll be back bigger and ever, bigger and better this year as well. All right, Johnno, let's get into your topics of the week. You want to start with the talk around the grand final bye?
Well, I just was thinking around post the Jeremy Cameron scenario and the concussion of playing, and the way it happened, I suppose, towards the end of the game, and whether decisions were made even by Jeremy and the cutthroat nature of where the game was at that particular point. And I instantly go straight to a prelim final, Cornesy, and if that happens in a prelim final and a player is removed, and that's where the rules go to, that a player is removed from the ground, then does that player still deserve the right to represent in the grand final? So, and what I'm trying to take away here is the player in 7 minutes to go in a game, in a prelim final, and the game's on the line, and a Jeremy Cameron has to come off because of the severity of the knock that we witnessed on the weekend, or does he try and fight to stay on for another period of time of that last quarter to try and win the game, and therefore put himself in a position that he won't go through protocols potentially similar to what we've witnessed? So I just think that a player, if we're going to take that away from and have them exit the arena, which I think should have happened on this occasion personally, that do they have the right to play in a grand final, or at least get themselves right to potentially play in the grand final? Because there's still the chance that they mightn't pass the testing over a longer period of time and still not play. But do they still deserve the right to still play in that grand final in a couple of weeks' time, not the week later, and shift the bye?
It just makes, I mean, the players, I think I've been surveyed, I think I read this, that they think they're in favour of that being shifted. It just makes complete sense. Not only does it protect the advantage of finishing in the top four, I think, for those teams that finish in the top five, win the qualifying final, then have the week off. That's the advantage that it should be there for. Now, that dissipates a little bit with the pre-finals buys we've seen, but it also protects concussion, which is going to be a huge issue. So they should change that this year. I mean, I know all fixturing and fans and all that, so it's probably a ridiculous thing for me to say in hindsight. But next year, it has to be. And we saw that it works with the 2021 Grand Final in Perth. Now, that was for different reasons, but it just works in other big sports. Have all your awards wrapped up in the week off. Brownlow, reveal the All-Australian, do all that. Give the AFLW perhaps some clean air in that week. It just makes sense. All right, this is not good news for the Blues because they've been smashed by injury. News just in, Jack Martin has suffered another calf strain and he's going to miss the trip to play against Sydney. Another injury blow after just one game back. Carlton fans, 0433 98 11 16, 1300 736 736. Plenty of time to take your calls after Johnno leaves us at 6:30. But Cherahami, Cottrell, hotspot, Jack Martin, calf on top of everything else that's going on. What a nightmare for them. All right,
it is.
Tell me about the Bombers.
Well, I was wrong last week, Kane. I want to put that straight out there, and rarely will we say that. But I think you asked me the question last week, which is the team that is going to probably drop out of the 8 come the home and away end of home and away season, and I did say that looking at it last week that it probably would be the Bombers based on the other teams in the 8. But their game against GWS was brilliant. Their second half was strong. Their maturity is just going through the roof at the moment, and you've got to sit there and just absolutely admire what they've been able to do and the strength that some of these players are going to. And I talk of, Langford backing up a big year last year and continuing on with his fantastic form. And I put Merritt to one side. Redmond goes from strength to strength. McGrath is just playing awesome football. Perkins and Durham and their rise as players in the competition. Their recruits, and led by Goldie. Caldwell playing at another level at the moment. Guelphy bobbing up and doing his thing. And this is without Parrish, who's got a lot of improvement to make, no question. Draper's the same. Ridley will return. Setterfield will return. And
Peter
Dersma
Wright's
will
just
return.
gone as well.
And
they've had nothing from the best and fairest.
Exactly. And he's coming off, obviously, the big spell from being suspended. So he'll take a little bit of time to get going, Corns. But they play North Melbourne, Richmond, the Suns and Blues before the bye. So they sit on 6.5. They go to 10.5 wins, I think, at the bye. Then they come off the bye and play the West Coast Eagles, Cornsy. So they go to 11.5 off the bye. Then it starts to get a little bit more challenging.
But they don't
for
leave Melbourne,
the Bombers.
Johnno. They don't leave.
No, they
leave
don't.
once.
But
You can't miss
this
from
is
here.
where
I don't know buts.
No, they won't miss. But how far can they go? Is
No,
this?
I'm
Are
with
we
you on that.
talking? Are we talking just in the making the 8, or are we
Win a
realistically
final.
going top
Pass
4
mark from here.
now?
Win a final.
Okay, so off the West Coast Eagles, they play Geelong at the MCG, right? So I'd probably still put that in favour of the Cats.
Yep.
Then they play Collingwood at the MCG. Now, I know they've had the draw. We wait to see where Collingwood's at this point, but they're on the fly at the moment, the Pies. So that one probably sits in my eyes just in favour of Collingwood.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go Melbourne at the MCG, which is another
Melbourne
one, right?
favourites, yep.
Right, Melbourne favourites. Then they go Essendon at Marvel Stadium. They start favourites in that one.
No, you said Essendon. So who was that one?
Sorry, Essendon v Adelaide.
Adelaide.
At Marvel.
So, favourites in that one.
Start favourites. Then they play St Kilda, where they start favourites. Fremantle at the MCG.
And MCG, favourites. They don't leave. Favourites in that one.
Favourites in that one. And then the Gold Coast Suns at Marvel. So they don't. Their last four, we're saying they should win 4. They might win 3.
So that gets them to what? 14
and a half. 13 and a half. 14 and a half. So yes, but I don't know whether that's enough for top 4. But it's certainly enough for them to make and play finals footy this year.
All
So
right, lids
Essendon
off.
fans get excited about that.
Essendon fans, lid is off. And Johnno just gave you a compliment, okay? So note that down. We
That's
get a lot
rare.
of feedback that he's hard on the Bombers. He's not. He's just giving you a compliment. How did you see the Daicos and Reid matchup?
Well, it was actually awesome watching it live, Corns. And we pumped this up, obviously, as one of the key matchups on the day. I was disappointed in the West Coast Eagles as a whole on the afternoon. I thought I was going to see more personally from them with what they had delivered. I know Yo wasn't playing and Waterman as well, but their pressure just dropped away and the Pies turned one on with 6 of their own best players, I think, out of the side, and 4 of their starting forward line players didn't play as well. But the vision and all our mindset went to Daicos versus Reid, and Daicos taught him an absolute footy lesson on the weekend. And in some ways, I think it'll be awesome for Reid to be able to sit there on review, and I hope his coach is going through with him around what Daicos was able to do on this particular day, Cornsey, because his power run was a lot better than Reid's, and I know we understand where Reid's at from a physical point of view and needs to work on some few aspects of his game, but Daicos was that much more powerful and that much more smart in his running, in his positioning, and all these things that Reid took a fantastic hanger and had 2 or 3 really strong moments on the game, but Nick Daicos was the best player on the ground, and he just I hope he shows Harley Reid the exact way that and the level that he needs to get to in 2 or 3 years' time to be a real force in this competition.
So this was my exact point in the lead up to the game in response to what Nick Daicos did late in the previous week, and then Harley Reid not being able to get through the game, and hearing Craig McRae speak about how Nick prepares himself and his high-speed running late in games, and I compared that to Reid, and I said, if that's where you want to get to, then go and learn from the best. Now maybe on reflection, I said it in the wrong tone, but essentially that's exactly what I meant. And you're essentially saying the same. You would be negligent as a coach to not go and there's one, I showed it on Footy Classified, there's one centre bounce where they match up on each other, and Reid just sort of drifts away, and Nick sprints out to the far wing, and he gets involved twice, and he brings the ball back inside, and he's sprinting, and he sort of leaves Harley in his dust. Now, that's not a criticism to say, as his midfield coach, you sit down and you say, look, you matched up on Nick here. This is where we need you to get to in 3 years. So let's start building your program and your training habits around getting to that level. That's all I was saying.
But the first 2 centre bounces, he was standing next to Scott Pendlebury, who wins the first couple of centre bounces. So therefore you go, okay, well, Pendlebury did this to you.
Correct.
So how can you learn from that? So when you play this week, it doesn't happen when you're fronting up on the best midfielders, or you halve the next one, and that becomes your win as a young player in the competition. And then he had to line up on Crisp, who was flying through the middle of the ground at different stages off him as well. So what he would learn playing against a midfield for Collingwood that was absolutely on fire is so valuable for him. Or if he just walks off and goes, I had a poor game, and doesn't learn and doesn't look at it seriously.
Or his coach. So that was where I was not disappointed, but I just disagreed with the likes of Gary Lyon, who said, look, he's played 7 games, and they almost sort of mocked the critique of it, and Lordo was quite against it as well. So I sort of said, well, at what point are you coachable? Do you have to wait until 40? Like, this kid's special. I referenced that. I said, I reckon Horn Francis's first year was a write-off because he probably didn't want to be coached, and maybe at North they didn't coach him hard enough, but he could have got there, not that he's there yet, he could have progressed there quicker if he was coached hard and if he began to have those habits as a young player.
We can't lose sight of where we all started in this game. And I've said before, my first 5 games are on Matera, Allison, Bradley, Crawford, Harvey, and I got beaten quite easily in those games. But I had to learn to fight, to hang in there and run like I've never run before. And when you're really fatigued, really push to that next contest because they're doing it as senior players. And it's the prime example here when you look at a young man who's played on one of the best players in the competition, one who's been a superstar for 17 years, and Chris, who's had an excellent 3 or 4 years at Collingwood, playing in various positions. If he's not learning, well, I'm not saying he's not. I'm hoping that West Coast are teaching him so much from that outcome on the weekend that it's only in years 2, 3, and 4 that he looks back at that and goes, that was the best example of what I needed to learn as a player to become to where I am now, an elite, because you just have to.
Hey, just before we get to your rolling All-Australian team and yes or no with Johnno, we had Scott Pendlebury on breakfast on Monday, and we just asked him about the pathway to being a coach and how it's not as attractive as what it once was. And he was brutally honest. He said, look, it's not as attractive financially for the great players. And you sort of see what Joel Selwood has done. He's not gone into coaching, not saying he may not end up there. Luke Hodge, these champions of the game. Trent Cotchin hasn't gone in that way yet. And he said, it's just not as attractive. Now, he's different. He is dead set on being a coach. But how do we make it more attractive for these star players? Travis Boak might be another one, or Rory Sloane, to say, this is where I want to go. It's just money.
It's pretty easy.
It's just money.
Because, Cornesy, the one, and it's probably gone up a little bit, but the one wage that hasn't changed in our game is assistant coaches.
Yeah.
In terms of...
But the hours, the hours have gone up.
The hours have gone up, and everyone else is getting paid more handsomely in the competition, yet the assistant coaches still aren't getting what they should really be getting in this competition. Now, a starting position might be 150 in your first year out, which is still fine. But if you're 6 years in and it's still 150 to 175, well, come on, seriously. Like where the game's at, it should be 250, 300s that these coaches getting. You still need your rookie coach wage, but it should go up if you remain in that system for 2 to 3 years, and then you start to build a real career in coaching. You should be rewarded, not just be the senior assistant who's getting the reward. The reward needs to be a little bit deeper than that as well, and therefore you will get these guns who absolutely love coaching to be involved.
Now, I just gave you a little bit of homework about 3 minutes before we came on, and I wanted to look at the 2022 draft, Johnno, and look at a Hawthorn player who the Hawks traded up to get, Josh Weddle, at pick 18 via Sydney. Adelaide were involved and Melbourne were involved. Pick 18 seems an absolute steal. You've had a look at this draft. Where would he now be selected? So I'll go through the players, the top 10, because he's definitely a top 10. So Cadman was 1.
Yep.
Hard to say, isn't it? Hard to judge Aaron Cadman yet. Ashcroft 2.
Yes.
Sheasel 3, Wardlaw 4, Sardis 5.
Hasn't played enough yet.
Humphrey 6.
Like him.
Cam McKenzie at the Hawks was 7. Jai
Jumped
Clark
him.
at Geelong
Jumped him.
was 8. Ruben Jinby was 9.
Getting plenty of game time and will get better, but jumped him.
Burns the ball too much for me at this early stage of his career. And Mateus Philippou
Jumped him.
will be a star, but just finds himself
Jasper
in the
Fletcher's
VFL
playing well for
at
the Brisbane
moment.
Lions as well. But I put him, as you say, Michael Lanny at
Yes. Who's the one
Adelaide.
after?
Right, so he's pick
Sorry,
17.
the one before, 17, a father son.
I think he sits well and truly comfortably in the top 10 now.
Yep.
I love
You
the
loved
way
him
that
last
he.
year.
I love him.
Yeah.
And then you've got Weddle. So I think Weddle probably sits. It probably still goes Cadman, Ashcroft, Sheasel, Wardlaw. You can put them whatever you want. Humphrey and then probably Weddle.
So you'd have Humphrey ahead of him.
Yep. Still.
Okay, I think I'd agree with you 4. I'm not sure on Cadman yet. He may end up being a better player than
That's right.
Cadman, but it's
But I
difficult.
don't think you can shift him at the moment.
Too early to
Yeah.
judge. Too early.
Yeah.
But I've got him at 5. Hawks fans, you got an absolute ripper. Shrewd drafting, which is what you need when you are rebuilding, and that was a good move. Of course, that was all involved in the Jago O'Meara trade as well to Fremantle. They got Lloyd Meek as a part of that, who's been in good form. The big ruck. Johnno, take us through your rolling All-Australian team.
All right, let's get stuck into it. So Nick Vlaston still remains in the back pocket. Watching him again on the weekend, although Sam Darcy in the mid-smash got a couple of big grabs on him, I thought he was still an excellent player and is holding down that spot at in the back pocket. Pearce at full back, although probably his worst game for the year, but there's circumstances obviously surrounding Fremantle and their performance that we totally understand. Jake Lever remains in the back pocket with Jacob Weitering now on a bit of a fly. So we knew that Weitering would come back and play well, and it's just probably a matter of time. He fights his way potentially into that defence. Whitfield, Blakey and Nick Martin remain on the half-back line. Florent is just floating there as well as a potential replacement if one of these players has a bad time.
Champion loved what Ollie Florent has done this year last night.
So Gooden on the wing, Merritt in the middle, and then Josh Kelly now. He's on the wing still, but with 6 weeks out of the game, Cornesy, there becomes a big opportunity here for another wingman, whether that becomes a Blake Acres or someone of that ilk that can fight their way into that spot, because there will be a swap here, and there's a big opportunity now for someone to secure a wing spot in the All-Australian team. It's wide open, so players should be driving for that. Myers at the half-forward line still, Cameron and Petrarca. Then you've got Langford, who comes into the side from the Bombers.
Nice.
In the forward
Bombers
pocket.
fans, Langford is in.
I've got a couple of them in now. Curnow and Hogan. And then I've got Gawn, Heaney and Green. Sarong, Butters. Daicos comes in for Rowell. And I forgot to write down and Cripps is the final one. Bench spot. I forgot to write him down. Had to go back to last week's team. So Cripps is in there as well, Blues fans.
All right.